After 3 years in engineering, I switched my major to psychology, and I got a bachelor's of science in psychology. And for me, that represented not just a change in major, it represented a shift from focusing on that which was primarily external to that which is more subtle. In Vedic terms,
from numbers to emotions.
something like that. It was very satisfying in one way, and it had gaps. I was finding that all these principles that were so enthusing for me in the transformational movement, the human potential movement, counseling, that they were all included and transcended in this sublime transcendental philosophy and practice of Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness. These areas of psychology, leadership training, communication, principles, seminars, not only they could be used in the process of spiritual life, but that all these principles and methods, that they found their source, origin, completion, and perfection in the philosophy, in the practical philosophy I was hearing from Srila Prabhupada. For one who has the nature and is inclined in that way, there's just huge scope to share this sublime knowledge and process through what is called coaching, psychology, seminars, transformational process, leadership training.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Today we are with Dr. David Wolfe, PhD, and author of innumerable groundbreaking books around spirituality, transformative coaching, and psychology. Dr. Wolfe is the founder of the Satvatove Institute of Transformative Coaching, together with Marie Glasheen. And today I wanted to introduce you to him, also because part of the main reason why I got to be here in Alachua is to meet Dr. David Wolfe and participate in the Satvatove courses and seminars. And through that I also got to experience the community here in Alachua. And as someone who I feel particularly drawn to the way how he integrates his spiritual life with his natural passion, natural attraction in transformative coaching, I wanted to give him the stage and ask him to share about his personal experience around transformative coaching before he came to his spiritual journey, and within that, and how it grew and developed to what the School of Transformative Coaching in Satvatove is now. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Ramachandra. Yeah, so well, from the time I was a teenager, particularly my late teens, which goes back to the late 1970s, and I was involved with the human potential movement in the early 1980s. I got trained as a counselor in the kind of crisis intervention, person-centered approach to counseling, and I was attracted to these things. I had a natural attraction to transformational process and cultivating capacity to enter people's worlds and support them in their own self-discovery and like that. And then about at the same time, actually in 1980, I got my first small books of Srila Prabhupada, like Science of Self-Realization, Beyond Birth and Death. Started consuming my first plates of prasadam also in 1980. This was in State College, Pennsylvania, at a Bhakti Yoga Center run by Stambadas, who's also in Alachua County. And okay, and so that I was very enthused, inspired by personal development, transformation, counseling. I started out studying engineering, actually, and I was the grades were fine, but I was very not satisfied. So after 3 years in engineering, I switched my major to psychology, and I got a bachelor's of science in psychology. And for me, that represented not just a change in major, it represented a shift from focusing on that which was primarily external to that which is more subtle. in Vedic terms.
Numbers to emotions.
Something like that, yeah. Numbers, materials, to emotions, subtle thought, the realm of mind, the realm of intellect, thought. And then I naturally continued that path to that which was even more subtle. Spirit. The spirit, to use a basic analogy, like there's the hardware, then there's the software, and the software represents the subtle material body, mind, intellect, ego. But we're not the hardware or the software, we're the operator of the computer. So, so as I was more and more reading Prabhupada's books, beginning to take prasad, hear a few kirtans there in State College, Pennsylvania in the early 80s. So I was noticing, realizing that, you know, what I was experiencing, like in personal growth movement, human potential movement, counseling, psychology, that it was very satisfying in one way, and it had gaps. It had gaps. It was, well, that what I was getting from Prabhupada and reading his books, and I wasn't yet beginning to chant Hare Krishna mantra, but that started really after I got my Bachelor's of Science degree in the summer of 1983. I backpacked around Europe, ended up taking a boat from Greece to Italy, no, from Italy to Greece, then Greece to Israel. But that summer I started chanting japa, Hare Krishna Mahamantra japa. And so I was finding that all these principles that were so enthusing for me in the transformational movement, the human potential movement, counseling, that they were all included and transcended in this sublime transcendental philosophy and practice of Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness. That Krishna consciousness, Bhakti Yoga, not only that, like these areas of psychology, leadership training, communication, principles, seminars, not only they could be used in the process of spiritual life, but that all these principles and methods, that they found their source, origin, completion, and perfection in the philosophy, in the practical philosophy I was hearing from Srila Prabhupada. So that was very satisfying. That was very satisfying for me. And as you're aware, and then I actually kind of first at some level committed to practice Bhakti Yoga. I moved into an ashram in 1984 in Israel, outside of Tel Aviv.
I was actually curious before you committed, or in the process of your commitment to your spiritual, to the spiritual practice, the practice of the Mahamantra. What was your relationship with transformative coaching, personal growth? Like you mentioned that it's in a sense one and the same, but in terms of what you were following before, the pursuit or the form of personal growth before, did you leave it aside, or you continued to to pursue a sort of practice or education around it too, or you put it aside and dive into the Mahamantra chanting practice?
There was nothing to leave aside. Really, like there was no practice. I had no sadhana.
Yes.
Like, you know, if I didn't go to Europe, then Israel, and then come to the ashram and start seriously practicing bhakti, you know, maybe I would have gotten a graduate degree and maybe either go to university or started facilitating transformational seminars, which was sort of my life plan. But that's the thing, there was nothing to leave aside. It was because it was all included, like Krishna consciousness. I found, let's just take, for example, a principle like 100% radical personal responsibility. Okay, so like I was attracted to that principle rather than like seeing myself as a victim of life. Okay, so like, right there from the age of 18, I participated in my first transformational seminar. It was offered by an organization called LifeSpring, which was international, or at least throughout North America, and I participated in downtown Philadelphia. Okay, I'm just taking that as one principle. Yes. Okay. So I am I am the 100% author, creator of my life. Okay, so I like that principle. And okay, at the same time, naturally, I had questions like, okay, well, how's that work? Like, how come some people are born into this situation? How come some people are born into, you know, a very opulent situation? Some people are born suffering like anything. Like, there's not equality, you know, in terms of material birth. And then, okay, so then I read about the principles of transmigration of the soul, the principles of karma. And then, oh, okay, yeah, I'm responsible even for the circumstances of my birth. And maybe less than consciously, but as a result of the consciousness I created, the desires I cultivated before taking birth as David Wolfe at Einstein Hospital in Philadelphia in 1960. Oh, okay. So then I wasn't getting that in the secular humanist human potential movement. So I didn't need
complete answer.
More complete. Or let's say a principle like to live, be, do, have, rather than have, do, be, or do, have, be. That was very exciting, and I was getting that in personal growth and like living, be, do, have. Okay, yeah, I like that. All right, so now live from my being, and then let the doing and having flow from that, rather than, oh, I need to have this in order to be satisfied, fulfilled. That's always chasing the carrot on the stick, always frustration. Made complete sense to me. All right, so what is that being? Well, yeah, so I was getting answers when I'm reading Prabhupada's books or hearing some Bhakti Yoga lectures from Stamba in State College, Pennsylvania. Otherwise, I just get some vague, amorphous answer. Ultimately, our being is nothing.
Yeah.
Ultimately, our being is a white light, or, you know, like that.
So you would say, in a sense, that without the spiritual approach to personal growth or transformation in general, there's a blank slot. What do you call it?
Yeah,
slot
yeah. There's gaps. There's some missing
into the most major questions.
Into the most major questions. So what I was getting from psychology, counseling, personal growth, transformation, I didn't need to give anything up. I was just realizing it more completely, philosophically and practically. I'll share a quick story about that, just hearing what you expressed, Ramachandra. So in February 2009, I was facilitating some seminars in Canada. February in Canada, great place to be. Yes. And so this particular seminar, it was a Satvatove foundational seminar, and it was in Peterborough, Canada. It's a suburb of Toronto. Okay. And so in the seminar, now you're familiar, so towards the end of that seminar, we present the be, do, have model, different paradigms of life, have, do, be, do, have. We present that towards the end of the final day. So in the seminar, there were two, well, young, maybe about your age, like about 30 years old, and they were both PhDs. They were a married couple. I'll say their names, they won't mind. And their names were John and Sarah. Okay, and they were quite accomplished, very bright people. They they would travel around the world to places of high tension. They would go to Serbia, the Middle East, and they would do conflict resolution, and they would present this be, do, have. So I did the presentation of be, do, have as we tend to do it in the Satvatove Foundational Seminar, and afterwards I was looking. And they were both sitting there looking rather stunned. And then the woman, Sarah, she raised her hand and she said, I've been teaching be, do, have around the world for many years. And just now I realized that I never really understood it. And then her husband, John, said, and I've realized that it's not possible to understand it unless we understand it in this context, within this framework, about what is the nature of being, what are the three gunas, what are the three modes of nature that the soul allows to cover the soul. So, because again, these were two really bright people, accomplished movers and shakers in the world, and they were really familiar with these principles of human potential, transformation, growth, consciousness. They were really familiar with it. And then it was very affirming for me because they got like, oh, in this particular principle, yeah, that it really, they really connected with the completion and perfection and origin of the source of the principle.
Yeah, which, as I understand from your from the process of your spiritual growth, you really could fill up that gap in such a fundamental principle in transformative coaching in general, right? Because I guess Biduhev is not, I heard about Biduhev from Satvatove, but as I understand now, it's not just something that relates to the book which you mentioned, that principle, but it's a very basic approach and very core approach in transformative coaching, and through your spiritual experience, you were able to give that real depth, the real core to the roots.
Yeah, and that's very satisfying for me. And then, yeah, and so a lot of my inspiration, you know, through the coaching, the coach trainings, the seminars, the writings, all our programs, is to illustrate that there's a verse by Narada Muni, idam hi pumsas tapasa shutasya suktasya suktasya chaburi datayo avichu torta kavibir nirupito yaduta mashloka gunanu varnanam, which essentially says, Narada Muni and Srila Prabhupada in the purport to that Bhagavatam verse describes about physics, social work, psychology, economics, politics, all these fields of human endeavor, science, art, crafts, all these professions, that in spiritual life they're not to be rejected, but to use them in the service of self-realization, in the service of the self turning towards itself, in self-discovery, the self turning towards the divine in a spirit, in an attitude of devotion. That's the perfection. That's the perfection of psychology, of economics, of science, of physics, of art, of dance, like that.
Yeah, and it's very special because, as I think I forgot to mention that, but Satvatove and the School of Transformative Coaching of Satvatove is officially accredited by the highest coaching. Are there a few coaching like federations, or? There
are, and the most well-known, renowned, established one is the International Coach Federation.
ICF, right.
And the International Coach Federation accredits the Satvatove School of Coaching at its highest level, which is called ACTP, accredited coach training program. And just to follow up on that, so our Satvatove, to follow up on this whole conversation, our Satvatove School of Coaching, it's especially known in the coaching world internationally as being on the cutting edge of spiritual consciousness approaches to coaching process. And so this reminds me of how you and I, where you and I first met in person. That, okay, so then so there's ICF, International Coach Federation.
Yeah.
And then there's another organization which is closely connected with it's called ACTO. It gets to be a whole alphabet soup here, but it means Association of Coach Training Organizations. So those are like the founders of all the ICF schools. And they're the top coach trainers in the world. They're the trainers of the coach trainers, the founders of the coach training schools. So it's closely connected with ICF. So ACTO, the coach training organizations, they have their international conference, and it used to be in person, right? So in 2017, their in-person conference was in Toronto. And as you're well aware, that so after the conference, on my way back to Florida, I visited you in Montreal.
Yes, you did.
So anyhow, so they contacted me, and because they wanted me representing Satvatove to give a presentation, and so I conducted a keynote workshop at the conference. The workshop was entitled Mantra Meditation and transformative coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so we discussed about the timeless roots of the philosophy and practice of mantra. And actually, right towards the end of the workshop, I distributed japa beads to everyone. And just to give you an idea, most of the participants there, I recently turned 60 years old, most of the participants there were like my age, even older, like in their 50s and 60s. Some of them like were practicing psychologists for 30 years, and then they decided to switch to coaching and open a coaching school. So these, for the most part, these were not youngsters. So we taught them how to chant japa, and many of them took many japa beads to show their coaches and their clients, just to give you an idea of that integration.
Yeah.
That integration. And last year, the National Association of Social Workers invited me to conduct a similar workshop. This one was called Mantra Meditation and Clinical Social Work, and I assisted by Marie Malini. We conducted a workshop with social workers. It was their annual conference in Florida, held in Orlando in 2019. Yes, and so starting in the mid-90s, I started conducting some workshops, and then by the late 90s, longer seminars in the devotee communities. And like the way I see it, it's not like, oh, this can help bhakti yoga. It's integral to the process of bhakti yoga. We often use the metaphor given by Srila Rupa Goswami of pulling the weeds from the garden of the heart. And so many devotees experience that, okay, maybe, like we know what the watering process is, and, chanting and like that. And so, but Rupa Goswami describes that if we water and we don't give attention to pulling the weeds, that we end up watering the weeds. It can be like, well, yeah, I chant, or I learn shlokas, but maybe I have a weed of arrogance to feel superior to others. So if I don't pull that weed, of course the chanting God's names is always pure.
Yeah.
But if I don't pull the weeds, then every mantra I chant, every morning program I go to, I might also be watering the weed of arrogance.
Yes.
And so we found that those who were practitioners of the process of bhakti yoga, they were profoundly appreciating these transformational seminars. And they would consistently describe how, again, to quote Rupa Goswami again, as we hear from Srila Prabhupada, an essential aspect of Vaishnava practice, of bhakti yoga practice, guyamakiti prichati, to create environments in our relationships, in our communities, where there's a safe space to reveal the heart and mind confidentially, to inquire confidentially. Sometimes we would hear like, well, David or Dear Govinda Das. To be honest, the devotee community is the last place in the world where I would want to reveal my mind and heart confidentially. So it was like, it's funny, but it's because there's a lot of pain there. And it's not, this is just some psychology stuff. This isn't Krishna consciousness. No, this is an essential aspect of Krishna consciousness, to cultivate excellence, cultivate mastery, to be expert.
By pain you mean the weeds? Is that the...
All of it. Yes, it's all connected. So these are different aspects that we were finding, those who are already familiar with the process, that they were getting value for their spiritual life. They were, let's call it, pulling the weeds, looking at self-deceptions that they hadn't looked at before, and clearing them connected with renewed enthusiasm to serve Prabhupada's movement, cultivating capacity to create safe containers in their relationships, such that the relationships really became a place of authentic exchange and a place for enthusing each other for courageous introspection and inspired real practice of Krishna consciousness. We hear this term a lot, a term like pure devotional service. To serve purely, I mean, it can be an esoteric thing, but in a foundational way. If I'm withholding any parts of myself due to fear or ignorance, if any part of the diamond soul is covered, then there's no question of pure devotional service. If any aspect of my personal power is hidden or withheld, then it means I'm not giving everything. I'm not giving maybe in the name of humility or whatever. Now, of course, as one connects with and realizes their personal power, certainly there's the risk that could lead to arrogance, and it can lead to exploiting others. So that's definitely risks. At the same time, in genuine Krishna consciousness, like say if we think of great acharyas, Srila Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta, right? There's nothing withheld there. Humbly, they're giving all their Krishna given qualities. So many who were practitioners of Bhakti Yoga, they were discovering that there were so many parts of themselves that they allowed to be buried. And then connecting with those parts of themselves, they connected with a lot of joy to be able to offer those qualities that were dormant in their devotional service.
Yeah, it sounds like it was very vital for the people who participated in that, either from the devotional community or the outside, and it's something that really, how I feel that you really took to the essence of transformative coaching and your spiritual practice, and you gave a gift to so many varieties of communities through your own experience. And I see also the how you describe the integration with the International Coach Federation and other institutes, other recognized institutes and psychologists. That is how did your PhD play the role there? Is it something that how did it play a role?
Okay, well, thanks for your question. Yeah, so my PhD is entitled Effects of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra on Stress, Depression, and the Three Gunas. Kind of preliminary to that dissertation, also as part of my PhD courses, I developed what's called the Vedic Personality Inventory, the VPI. It's a personality assessment tool based on the psychology of the gunas, the three modes of nature, as described in Bhagavad Gita chapters 14, 17, and 18. So, yes, so it played a big part. For example, both the National Association for Social Workers, the Association for Coach Training Organizations, they saw that this isn't some just kind of fluffy, airy, new age thing, that there's rigorous scientific research. When I say scientific, I mean aligned, consistent with the most rigorous methods of modern social science. Okay. In more recent years, a team, I'm participating on the team, they're also developing research and with some publication headed by Dr. Gopal Damirla on the effects of chanting Hare Krishna on heart health, and like that. And if the findings are consistent with the Vedic assertions that chanting Hare Krishna is healthy, not just for the mind and spirit, also for the body. So they could see that there's a whole body of rigorous research for this practice, so that it's not some sectarian, it's not a religious thing, it's not for some sectarian spiritual group that apart from what someone believes, what someone's stance is about the universe, about soul, about God, that research has indicated strongly that by chanting this mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, then people relieve stress, relieve depression, increase life satisfaction, increase confidence, live with more focus in a purposeful way. And these are goals of clinical social workers and coaches. Yes, yeah. And so when the when the conference organizers see that, and this was certainly a goal of mine. You know, I didn't know how the research findings would come out, but I knew when I started this in the mid-90s, I could see, because by the mid-90s I'd already been chanting Hare Krishna for a dozen years, right? And I could see already from looking in psychology research journals, social science research journals, many other meditation techniques, they had a base in scientific research. You know, different silent meditation, even some mantra research had been done, but no one had studied in a scientific way. When I say science, I'm talking about modern science. Okay, which of course has the whole process of modern science has its flaws. You know, like still, it has its uses, and people of the modern age more and more tend to be enamored with modern scientific methods. So I thought, well, let's apply those. That's why we titled the book a doctoral dissertation using modern methods to study an ancient practice. So other mantras had been studied, silent meditation had been studied, prayer had been studied, very interesting studies on prayer, that's very interesting, fascinating. But no one studied the mantra that's most recommended in the Vedas for the modern age. Right? Idi Shota Shakam Nam Nam Kali Kamasha Nashanam. So different Vedic approaches had been studied by modern science, going back maybe to the 60s and in an accelerated way into the 70s and 80s, 90s. But no one studied the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in a scientific way, you know, in a quantitative way. And so I thought, let's do, there's a gap. I like to fill gaps. So there's a gap there. So then more and more organizations, people are seeing that even for secular purposes, relieving stress, increasing life satisfaction, you know, the goals of positive psychology, that this has a strong research and publication base, and it's growing.
Yeah, and it gave basis to your institution and as I understand, really the School of Transformative Coaching and the coaching principles, practice, and principles of transformative coaching that you offer in your institute are based on your PhD on the dissertation.
Yes, yes, yeah. Well, it's principles and practice of transformative coaching. It's like a foundational coach training course that we offer, that satvatove offers, and all of our courses offered by our coaching school. It's founded in these timeless, eternal principles found in the Vedas. It's given to us by Srila Prabhupada, including in my dissertation on the Maha Mantra. Maybe later in part 2 we'll go directly there, but if not, in part 3 we go directly into utilizing mantra in coaching. For sure. And then you mentioned, yeah, so many groups, because I talk mostly about like in the you know, teaching, facilitating the seminars amongst those who regard themselves as devotees.
Mm-hmm.
And then especially starting around 04 to 08, then more and more those who came to the seminars were not spirit souls who identified themselves as practitioners of bhakti yoga.
Mm.
And then what was happening
Mm-hmm.
is they would have, just without exaggeration, they would describe it as, like in the Satvatove Foundational Seminar, Satvatove Advanced Seminar, the most profound experience of their life, the most profound transformational experience in their life. And they were introduced to this term and the process of pulling the weeds from the garden of the heart. And then they would come to Marie and I, and they would go, okay, yeah, this feels so liberating and so much lighter to pull those weeds, drop that garbage, clear the junk.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the watering process, right? Because now more and more they were coming to the seminars, and then got to the point where sometimes we'd had practically no one in the seminars who knew what the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra was. And they would go, so they weren't familiar with who is Bhaktivedanta Swami, what's the Maha Mantra. So they would come to Malini and I, Marie and David, and they would say, so what's the watering process? So I go, well, since you ask. And then that led us, starting around especially 2008, 2009, then we started developing, for example, what we call the Satvatove Philosophical Spiritual Roots Program.
Mm-hmm.
And developing a course, Bhagavad Gita Bhagavad Gita Yogic Principles and Transformative Coaching, which is offered by our coaching school. Developing our enlightenment programs, our mantra meditation programs, and developing so many courses that more and more directly give, okay, now that the field is clear, well, it's good to feel that, but like if we water and don't pull the weeds, then we water the weeds and the weeds grow. Similarly, if we pull the weeds and don't water, well, we got a desert.
Yes.
So, okay, so now people, so many spirit souls having human experiences, more and more, and this is very encouraging for me, that their first contact with Srila Prabhupada and with Bhagavad Gita, with Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is through the Satvatove experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're embracing it, even committing to the process of sadhana that Prabhupada encouraged.
Yeah, I think it will be specifically something very interesting that part of my audience will be really interested in. Perhaps someone who had, I can see myself that I had in the past like inclination to psychology, personal growth, but not finding the core of what Srila Prabhupada is describing in the process of Bhakti Yoga really leaves in this empty gap that in Satvatove one can be actually accredited through these courses that you offer through the Transformative coaching school, and show out there as a psychologist, as a coach, and make a change in the world of personal growth.
Yes. Yes, and I'm very excited about that, and there's huge scope for service for one who has the nature and is inclined in that way. There's just huge scope to share this sublime knowledge and process through what is called coaching, psychology, seminars, transformational process, leadership training, and that's that's a big part of our inspiration and endeavor to illustrate what's possible there.
Yeah, and there are courses, right, coming up in. I think it's what is the next?
Coach training.
Yeah, the course.
Yes, principles and practices of transformative coaching. That the next semester begins on February 24th, 2021, and this is online. It's online. This was a course we were doing online even before the pandemic. Yeah, we've been doing this online really since our coaching school opened in 2004. And classes, it's 2-hour internet video classes, very interactive classes. So it's not like I lecture for 2 hours. So although there is certainly also a strong didactic element about the philosophy and the principles and the knowledge base, and there's also extensive skill development, feedback. Okay, classes will be on Wednesdays from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, starting on February 24th, 2021. Principles and Practices of Transformative Coaching.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. If anyone would be interested, I'm going to link down below the website where you can read more about the principles and practices of transformative coaching in the Satvatove Institute. And thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next part of we're going to be interviewing Marie Glashine about the School of Transformative Coaching in Satvatove. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.